Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Supporters of the four men accused of conspiracy to commit murder against the RCMP were back at the Lethbridge courthouse. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston speaks out following devastating flooding which impacted his province. And as the Trudeau government prepares for a cabinet shuffle, more Liberal MPs have said they will not be seeking re-election.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The four men accused of conspiracy to commit murder of RCMP members during the Coots border blockade were back in court on Tuesday. Pre-trials already began for Chris Carbert, Chris Lysak, Anthony Olenek, and Jerry Morin, who all remain in custody. Meanwhile, around a dozen people gathered on the steps of the courthouse to show their support for the four men. A couple we spoke with said they believe the accused are completely innocent. They say the men were simply protesting peacefully during the blockade back in February of last year.
I've heard a lot of stories about the cops being corrupt, and they're victims of
the tyranny. Well, they haven't even have a parking ticket or any past crimes that they've done. You know, normally you lead up to something, right? You just say, well, I'm going to go shoot somebody, right? You know, you're going to, and it's not there. So how do you come up with this?
They're nice
Doesn't make
guys.
any sense. And they're nice guys.
They're just normal guys, and they're not murderers or even want to be murderers.
Attempted to be.
The couple say they'll continue to support the men and will be there until the end of the trials. Lethbridge police have charged a 33-year-old man with aggravated assault following an incident last week where a 47-year-old man sustained serious head injuries. Police say on July 12th, the man was allegedly assaulted by three other men at the intersection of 13th Street and 3rd Avenue North. He was punched and kicked repeatedly, but refused to be taken to hospital for treatment. Then the next morning, EMS responded to the victim's home, where he was found to be in medical distress. He was taken to Chinook Regional Hospital, then transferred to Calgary, where he remains in serious condition. Following the investigation, police arrested a suspect. The victim and accused are apparently known to each other. Joshua James Myers of Blairmore is charged with aggravated assault and breaking the conditions of his bail. He remains in custody and will appear in court on July 31st. Members of Lethbridge City Council voted 5-4 against a motion to look into the feasibility and cost of constructing an iron fence around Galt Gardens. Mayor Blaine Hagan and Councillor John Middleton Hope brought the motion forward on Tuesday. Middleton Hope voted in favour, citing increased safety needs of Lethbridge residents.
By erecting a wrought iron fence around the park, we are able to better control use of the park and reduce the risk of vandalism, loitering, and other criminal activities that have become so prevalent. The fence will act as a physical barrier, providing a sense of security for park visitors, especially families and children, who will be able to enjoy many activities in a safe and relaxing environment. Furthermore, it will discourage encampments, drug use, and biohazardous debris, returning the park to the citizens of Lethbridge that perhaps more accurately reflect the original intent of the Galt family, who over 100 years ago donated more than 9 acres as parkland in the heart of this city.
Councillor Belinda Crowson, meanwhile, voted against the motion and explained why she's against the idea of erecting a fence around Galt Gardens.
It's a division within our community when you put fences up. And fences are incredibly powerful imagery. They're incredibly powerful symbols. And then, of course, there is the real fences as well. And I cannot in any way vote for this. I know we have a lot of work to do in our community. I want to find the way to help our residents as much as anyone else. But the fence is not, to me, the answer. And even looking into a fence will create a lot of concerns in our communities.
A permit has been issued to demolish the Lethbridge Hotel. The hotel was destroyed by fire on February 24th. City officials say the demolition should begin this week and will result in the closures of roads and sidewalks. Timeline for the work's completion is not yet known. There is asbestos in the building, so crews can only proceed when we don't have strong winds here in the city. Fire crews responded to the blaze at the hotel around 2:15 in the morning on February 24th. An investigation revealed that the fire was deliberately set and a 33-year-old Lethbridge man was charged back in May. Country singer and songwriter Corb Lund said he was surprised when he got the call from Lethbridge and District Exhibition to be this year's Whoop Up Days parade marshal. He says he hasn't been in a parade since he was a kid back in 4-H. The multi-CCMA and Juno Award winner, who performed in the Grand Ole Opry stage last year and starred in the movie Guitar Lessons, has already had a busy summer. He just released a new album and has been touring all over the United States. But Lund, who still lives in southern Alberta, says he'll be home just in time to lead the parade on August 22nd. This year's Whoop Up Days theme is celebrating southern Alberta, Canada's agriculture destination, which Lund says is a pretty good fit for him.
Oh, well, I mean, on one hand, it makes sense kind of, but I wasn't thinking of that. So I guess it was a surprise. Yeah. My family's had a long association with the exhibition. My uncle Tom Ivans was the president for years. And my drummer's grandpa was the president way before that, Ernie Snowden. And I think I competed it. I think I rode steers at the rodeo when I was a kid. My mom and dad competed there. So yeah, that's neat. It's neat. And it's kind of good because, you know, as we all know, I'm from Alberta and I live in Alberta, and my family's been involved in ag for 120 years here. My mom's side is from Cardston and my dad's side's from Raymond. So they've been ranching and farming here for an awfully long time. Some of the guys in my band too, actually. So yeah, it feels like a good fit.
What an incredible honor. Parade Marshal, congratulations. By the way, Whoop Up Days runs from August 22nd to the 26th at the Lethbridge and District Exhibition. Well, we're hoping for some good weather for Whoop Up Days next month. Lately, it's been sunny and hot for much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek of the forecast. Jeanette, this is a good week to maybe find some shade and definitely stay hydrated.
Yeah, it sure is, Hal. You're not kidding about that. And you know what, though? We are still sitting at 8 degrees or so cooler than we were yesterday. And it looks like for the rest of the week, we're going to be sticking around the 20s, so lower than 30, at least until we get to about Sunday. So today's high 29, not quite where we were yesterday, up in those high 30s. Even overnight, though, we're not getting a lot of reprieve in the evening as we're sticking into the teens there. We were also dealing with a gusty wind today, up to 50K. We're going to be dealing with that tomorrow as well, looking at a 40K wind, high of 28 degrees, and mainly sunny skies. And I will be back later in the show to tell you how the rest of the week is shaping up.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The province of Nova Scotia is still reeling and trying to clean up following torrential rains and devastating floods, which have killed at least 4 people, including 2 children. The remains were found on Tuesday morning in Brooklyn, Nova Scotia. Premier Tim Houston said this is simply a terrible time for his province.
We can rebuild roads and bridges and buildings, but we can't bring people back. And the legacy for these floods will be the incredibly tragic loss of life. I do want to say that the heroic efforts of members of the RCMP and volunteer firefighters, search and rescue teams, community members, completely heroic efforts to return these people safely has been awe-inspiring. I had a chance to be down on site and talk to a number of them.
Premier Houston declared a province-wide state of emergency due to the damage caused by the storms and subsequent flooding. The BC Wildfire Service is reporting that a fire spotted near Invermere has already burned through 3 square kilometers over the past 24 hours. It is also threatening more than 1,000 properties. That includes the Panorama Mountain Ski Resort. Strong winds are making firefighting efforts very difficult around Invermere and on the 41 square kilometer St. Mary's River fire near Cranbrook, BC. Government officials say there are more than 450 fires burning across British Columbia. Meanwhile, here in Alberta, there are currently 134 active wildfires burning. Alberta Wildfire says 18 are burning out of control and 50 are being held. Fire officials say 72% of the fires were caused by lightning, around 19% were human-caused, and 9% are suspicious and are currently under investigation. So far this year, Alberta has seen 913 wildfires. Fire advisories continue for Banff National Park and Athabasca County. Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed a memorandum of understanding to strengthen the economic relationship between the province and the state.
Canada was the top destination for Michigan exports last year, valued at $27 billion. Canada has been one of the top job-creating nations in Michigan over the past 5 years, creating 3,900 jobs for Michiganders. And our steady exchange of ideas and commerce at borders, they affect us all. And so we got to continue to work together to build a prosperous future for future generations.
Ontario and Michigan have deep ties as partners, neighbors, and great friends. We share stewardship of 3 Great Lakes and have worked together to protect our thriving ecosystems, including our partnership to help restore, I was mentioning this to the governor, the wolf population at Michigan Isle Royale National Park. We share the busiest border crossing in North America and are each other's largest trading partner.
4 federal ministers are taking themselves out of the picture in advance of a cabinet shuffle expected this week. Fisheries Minister Joyce Murray, Public Services Minister Helena Jaczek, Transport Minister Omar Alghabra, and Addictions Minister Carolyn Bennett announced that they will not be running in the next federal election. Alghabra says he's also stepping aside from his ministerial duties because Prime Minister Justin Trudeau deserves a cabinet that is committed to running in the next federal campaign. You know, when it comes to reaching emissions targets, there's one former politician who says the UCP and the Trudeau government are very much in agreement. Drew Barnes, former independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, says the bottom line is that the net zero plan is a bad one and it will cost thousands of Albertans their jobs.
The UCP government's making it look like they're talking like they're against the net zero, but in reality, when you dig into it, Trudeau and the federal Liberals are saying net zero by 2035. The UCP is saying net zero by 2050. Either one will cost the people of Alberta 200,000 jobs, billions of dollars of value and prosperity and net worth. Let's call net zero what it is. It is a way to make us all poorer without truly helping raise the standard of living for all people in the world.
Make sure you catch the full interview with former Alberta MLA Drew Barnes and BCN's Naveen Day coming up after Business News. An Edmonton man was charged with terrorism following an investigation in the United Kingdom. Khaled Hussein, who is 28, was charged with membership of a proscribed organization after he was arrested at London's Heathrow Airport last week. He's charged alongside Anjem Chowdhury, a 56-year-old British preacher. British authorities say the charges relate to a proscribed organization known as the Islamic Thinkers Society. Many could say that the FIFA Women's World Cup serves as an inspiration for young female soccer players to pursue the sport professionally. An official with the Service Sports Centre here in Lethbridge, who's been actively involved in women's soccer, says seeing professional female athletes play helps to inspire the young players even more.
I think the women's side has really grown in the competitive side of things throughout Canada. But it's names like your Christine Sinclair and your Stephanie Labbe and those ones that visit different clubs and then to actually be able to watch them on TV. It kind of, I guess, entices them to try the sport or to push themselves to succeed at the level that they could.
Lausanne says she's been an advocate of female soccer, having coached the competitive LFC team for 10 years, and thinks the games are very inspirational for girls to get involved in the sport. Summer is a perfect time to fire up the barbecue and cook some delicious steaks or burgers. There are some important food safety tips, however, that you should keep in mind when cooking in the hot weather. Video journalist Micah Quinn chatted with the University of Lethbridge professor about the dangers of cooking during the blistering summer heat.
Dr. Kim Stanford is an associate professor in the Biological Sciences Department with the University of Lethbridge. Stanford says pathogens increase in warm locations and can lead to food poisoning.
They like the temperature of a human or an animal, so they'll grow best when the outside temperatures are similar to our body temperatures.
Stanford outlined a few safety tips that barbecue lovers can use if they decide to head outside for an evening grill session.
Mostly it's just good common sense. So if you're doing your barbecue and you've cooked all your meat, if it's really, really hot outside, say it's over 30 above and you've got your food that you've cooked at a temperature of 30 outside, that food is only safe for about an hour, because even if you've cooked it, there can still be a few little residual bacteria, different things. If you're barbecuing, it's very important not to cross-contaminate. So if you take out your plate full of your steak or your chicken or whatever it is that you're going to put on the barbecue, you don't want to use that same plate when you take off whatever it is that you're cooking on the barbecue. You need to use a clean plate. For meat, the best way is to make sure you're safe is to use a meat thermometer. That's simple. And the simple rule of thumb is for things like hamburgers, 71 and it's done. So there's a nice little rhyme to help you help you remember.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
71 and done. I'll have to remember that. A Lethbridge ice cream shop has joined the latest round of trends on TikTok. The trend is called the Ice Cream Shop Challenge. It's where a customer orders an ice cream cone, but then their order turns out to be wrong, and the employee tosses the ice cream at a coworker. Swirl's Ice Cream decided to hop on the trend, and their video has gone viral, garnering over 4 million views.
Medium vanilla cone? Actually, it's supposed to be chocolate. Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, it was crazy. Like, within the first couple of hours, we had a couple thousand views, and we were all really excited, and then it got up to like 10,000 views, and we're all like, this is crazy. And then from there, it just suddenly like skyrocketed over like a few hours. We just were getting into the millions, and it was absolutely crazy experience, and I didn't expect like that would happen to us. I didn't even think we'd like post it. I wasn't sure if it'd get approved. I thought it'd just be a good laugh for us all, but it's been crazy how much attention it's gotten.
You know, Carter said it didn't take long to make the video. In fact, it only took one take, splat right in the face first time. You know, it's a good time for an ice cream today, however you could get it. Sweltering hot once again, and the hot weather continues for much of southwestern Alberta. The blue sky and sunshine should remain for the rest of the week. A full look at the weather pictures on deck. Well, it was a good day to enjoy some air conditioning if you happen to have it. Jeanette Rocher is now with a full look at the weather picture. Jeanette, we've been getting close to breaking records lately with the summer heat. How did today shape up?
Well, today, no, not even close, because we did still remain under 30 degrees. We were sitting at 29 today, not quite that record breaker that we were seeing on Monday, where we were at over 36 degrees, whereas the record was 33.4. So we definitely broke a record in Lethbridge yesterday, as did Medicine Hat, Drumheller, a number of other places in Alberta as well. As we get into tomorrow, we're looking at 28 degrees. And like I said before, we're looking at mainly 20s for the rest of the week. 26 on Thursday, 24 for a high on Friday, high of 26 on Saturday, and then we're going to see that 30 degrees again back with us on a Sunday with mainly sunny skies and a high of 28 on Monday. So it's definitely a warm week. It might not be record-breaking this week, but certainly a warm one. Definitely average high for this time of year, 26, average low 11 degrees, 36. That was our high temperature on this day back in 1939, and we were sitting at only 3 degrees back in 2001. Very chilly for July. Sun rose this morning at 5:52. We're looking at a sunset this evening at 9:23 p.m. So just over 15 hours and a half of daylight. Okay, as we look to the west coast tomorrow, seeing a mix of sun and cloud in Victoria, high of 20 degrees, always windy in the Juan de Fuca Strait, though high of 21 only in Vancouver. So they're definitely getting a reprieve from that heat as well with some moisture there. Looking at some rain activity as well happening in Edmonton. Look at that for a high, 16 degrees. What a difference. 24 for a high in Calgary with mainly sunny skies. And as we look to the rest of the prairies in Saskatoon, we're seeing a risk of thunderstorms with a chance of rain. 27 for a high. So we're still remaining very hot in Saskatchewan. Regina looking at a high of 29 degrees, mainly sunny skies, and 30 for a high in Winnipeg. Winnipeg seeing some shower activity with a risk of thunderstorms in the afternoon there as well. As we get to the central part of the country, high of 31 in Toronto, 30 degrees in Ottawa. Both of those cities seeing rain and possibility of some thunderstorms. 30 degrees for a high in Montreal, and looking at mainly clear skies as well. So it's going to be a hot one there. 26 for a high in Fredericton. Could see that possibility of a thunderstorm there. Shower activity. Also looking at some showers happening in Halifax, high of 29 degrees, 26 for a high in Charlottetown, risk of thunderstorms, and mainly sunny skies. Could see some cloud activity as well in the afternoon, high of 28 in St. John's. There you have it. That is your forecast.
TC Energy Corporation is selling 40% of its Columbia gas transmission systems to New York City-based global infrastructure partners for $5.2 billion. The Calgary-based company says it is going to continue to operate the pipelines, while both companies will jointly fund annual maintenance, modernization, and growth to further capacity and reliability. It says it expects global infrastructure partners' share of capital expenditures to average more than $1.3 billion annually over the next few years. The pipelines span more than 24,000 kilometers across North America, delivering a large portion of daily U.S. natural gas demand. New figures from an aviation data firm shows Canada's two largest airlines see a larger proportion of their flights delayed compared with many of their peers abroad. Stats from Cirium reveal that only 50% of Air Canada's flights were on time in the final 2 weeks of June and the first couple of weeks of July. Meanwhile, just 36% of WestJet's flights touched down within the 15-minute window of their scheduled arrival, which is considered on time. The numbers compare with on-time percentages of the high 60s and low 80s percentile for the 5 biggest airlines in the United States. Cineplex says the opening weekend for Oppenheimer and Barbie raked in the company's highest summer box office weekend of all time. The movie theater chain says the two films brought in more than $19 million in box office revenue during the weekend. This past weekend was the company's second highest grossing box office of all time, as 1.4 million guests flocked to see the new releases. More than 80,000 guests bought tickets to also see both movies on opening weekend. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 30 points on the day to finish at 20,551. The Dow was up 26 points to 35,438. The S&P 500 was up 12 on the day to 4567, and the Nasdaq was up 85 points to 14,144. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 59 cents to 79.33 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to 2.72 US. Gold was up 2 cents to 1964.97 US an ounce, and silver was down a cent to 24.68 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.78 per bushel, barley's at $9.49, canola's at $18.62, and corn is at $10.70 per bushel. Live cattle were down 45 cents to 178.30. Feeder cattle were down 3 cents to 243.23, and lean hogs were up $1.55 to 101.65. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 75.94 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, 4 federal ministers are taking themselves out of the picture in advance of a cabinet shuffle expected this week. Fisheries Minister Joyce Murray, Public Services Minister Helena Jassic, Transport Minister Omar Alghabra, and Addictions Minister Carolyn Bennett announced that they will not be seeking re-election. Alghabra says he's also stepping aside from his ministerial duties because Prime Minister Justin Trudeau deserves a cabinet that is committed to running in the next federal campaign. There was a big by-election win in Calgary last night, and the vote wasn't even close. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have details shortly of the big victory for the federal Conservatives. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. There was a pretty big by-election win for the federal Conservatives Monday night in Calgary Heritage as Chevalier Majumdar won former PM Stephen Harper's old riding. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, in the end, the vote wasn't even close. What can you tell us about the new Conservative MP?
He's someone who's been active in both building up democracy around the world and conservative circles for a long time. His time in the conservative movement goes back to Preston Manning and the Reform Party days. But he did spend several years working in places like Iraq and Afghanistan with organizations that were attempting to help build democratic institutions in those countries. He worked with Chris Alexander, the former MP. That's where I first met both of them. We're going back to probably 2006, 2007, perhaps. And just full disclosure, I've been a personal friend of Shiv Majumdar for a very long time. So I'm not sure I could say anything bad about him. He's a very smart guy, well respected, a bit of a younger Michael Chon. Not that Michael Chon is old by any means, but both of them very much focused on foreign policy areas. Both of them very smart. Both of them well respected and liked across party lines because Shuv is just that smart guy that you go to. He's someone, when he was not involved in politics, that if I was writing on foreign affairs issues and needed to understand or clarify something, he's one of the people that I would call. Spent many years at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, the nonpartisan think tank in Ottawa. Spent several years as an advisor to Stephen Harper and John Baird when Baird was Harper's foreign affairs minister. So smart guy, and he's going to be a good addition to Parliament.
What percentage of the vote did he actually take last night?
He ended up getting 65% of the vote, so that was up from Bob Benson, who got 57, I think, the last time out. But traditionally, this is a very conservative riding, conservative area. Whether it's Benson had done better in previous outings than the last one, they tend to get 60 to 70% of the vote. Shuv got 65. The Liberals got, last I looked, I think it was just under 15%. Same with the NDP and the People's Party and the Greens. They were way back in single digits.
Now, speaking of Conservatives, former Conservative Party leader Aaron O'Toole recently resigned his seat east of Toronto. Brian, when will that by-election take place, and who could we see as someone to possibly replace O'Toole in that riding?
Well, by law, Justin Trudeau will have to call the by-election to replace Aaron O'Toole. Well, I guess by early January at the latest. So, look, we'll talk about the cabinet shuffle in a minute. Trudeau will look for a time that's good for him. Are they having bad headlines? Does the cabinet shuffle work? Does it make them look better? Is there an issue that they can use in this Toronto suburban riding to try and win it? It's been in conservative hands for a very long time. Bev Oda held it before Aaron O'Toole, and Jamil Javani, my former colleague, he wrote columns for The Sun and for National Post. He was also the president of Canada Strong and Free Network. The replacement for the Manning Conference. He was highly involved in that. He's seeking the nomination. My understanding is he has the blessing of Pierre Poilievre to get that nomination. So we'll see in the next couple months as the parties try and figure out what works for them. The Tories already out there running, trying to make sure they keep that seat, and the Liberals looking for any angle they can to steal a seat back, because this is a government that knows they are not in the good graces of Canadians at the moment, let's say, and they're trying desperately to change that.
Brian, let's talk about what's going to be happening with the Trudeau Liberals shortly here. They're getting ready for a big cabinet shuffle, and some have already said they will not be seeking re-election, including Omar Alghabra.
Yeah, the transportation minister, who's had a rough couple of summers. He's the surprise for me. Some of the others, I'm not surprised. Carolyn Bennett, the Minister for Mental Health and Addictions, she's in her 70s. Right now, the Trudeau, his team in PMO has been saying to people, look, are you committed to being around at the next election and running in the next election? Well, if you're 72, the next election, if it goes in 2025, that's 2 years away. You're 74. Are you going to commit at that point to another 4 years? The life of a cabinet minister is not easy. I don't care which party you are. I don't care what age you are. You're getting up at the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning for a 6 a.m. flight to go to the other side of the country. You're constantly traveling. It is a stressful and demanding job on anybody. Carolyn Bennett deciding she wanted to bow out, not a surprise. Joyce Murray, Fisheries Minister, deciding to bow out, not a surprise. Same with Helena Jasic. I wouldn't be surprised to see Lawrence Macaulay and Bill Blair add their names to those not running. But Alghabra surprised me. Last year was a disaster at the airports, and you could blame the airlines. Absolutely. You could blame the airports themselves. Absolutely. But a part of it was federal policy and federal hiring or lack of hiring for security workers. Alghabra had actually made inroads on that, and he'd finally gotten to the point of a trusted traveler program, which bureaucrats had resisted for years, going forward. So he was making some good strides. So he's surprised that things have been turning around, that he's leaving. We're also hearing Marco Mendicino could be going. Just dropped from cabinet, the public safety minister. We're hearing Ahmed Hussein, the housing minister, could be dropped. David Lametti, the justice minister, may no longer be there. This is a major change, a real attempt by the Trudeau Liberals to put a new face on their government, which after 8 years in office, as any government would, you're starting to look tired after 8 years in office. And they desperately want to put a fresh face on it, try and give themselves a a new chance at life and a new chance at a majority whenever that next election comes.
Let's talk about Marco Mendicino for just a moment here, Brian. Many of his critics would argue that he's handled several files poorly, including most recently the Paul Bernardo transfer from a maximum to a medium security prison.
He absolutely has handled that badly. He's handled Chinese election interference badly, the gun control legislation badly. And what's shocking about this is Mendicino was seen as a good communicator. He was seen as a smart guy. As a former Crown prosecutor, he helped put away the part of the Toronto 18. You remember that terrorist trial? He was a federal prosecutor on that. So, people like myself who've been hard on him and who've covered him for a long time, part of why you're hard on him is, well, you're supposed to be one of the competent guys. He made some mistakes himself. He's also had some bad staffing. The fact that if we're to believe him, the deputy minister, the senior bureaucrat who's held senior positions in the government for more than 20 years, heard about the Paul Bernardo transfer and didn't think to raise it with the minister. If that's true, then he's got an incompetent deputy minister. And same with his political staff, not telling him. Either he told them, keep me out of the loop on things, or he's got horrible staff. And not to take away from Mendicino making his own mistakes, but you expect your staff to support you and keep you well apprised of what's going on so you can do their job. If we believe the story they're telling us, that didn't happen. So bad staffing, bad decisions by the minister. He's in a heap of trouble. I originally suspected he might just get shuffled to a different role like Harjit Sajjan did after being horrible at defense for so long. But there's a lot of speculation. He's just going to get dropped.
Does the fact that Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault made an announcement on ending the fossil fuel subsidies mean that he's likely staying put?
I'm actually really worried about that because Guilbeault is a problem in my view, for the Trudeau government. He's causing headaches for them. And, whether it's with Atlantic Canadians antagonizing them over the imposition of the carbon tax in ways that it didn't apply before, now it's applying just like it does in Alberta or Ontario, the clean fuel regulations. And that's even annoying Liberal Premier Andrew Furey in Newfoundland. And so that, Atlantic Canada is a big support base for the Liberals. He's causing problems for them there. He's picking fights with Danielle Smith in Alberta, with Scott Moe in Saskatchewan, with Doug Ford in Ontario, over things that he doesn't need to. And so I thought for sure he was going to be shuffled out. In fact, some people had told me months ago, before all the shuffle speculation started, he won't be environment minister come summer. But they let him make this announcement, and that makes me think, no, he's going to stay in that position, and that means he's going to continue to cause problems straight across the country for provincial governments, but also the government he represents. That is not good news for Canada.
Now, Brian, many Canadians are still dealing with a high cost of living right now when it comes to food, fuel, rent, mortgage payments, yet the Trudeau government is claiming a victory lap?
Yeah, they're saying, look, inflation's down at 2.8%. Well, how did inflation, the core number, get to 2.8%? The price of oil and gas dropped dramatically compared to June 2022. Here's a quick number for you. Now, your number is going to differ in Alberta because you always pay less for gas than the rest of us. But according to Stats Canada, according to the federal government, the average price of a liter of gasoline, just regular gasoline, in June 2022, the average price across Canada was $2.07. The average price in June 2023 was $1.61. That is a massive drop. So that makes the core number drop. Without that, inflation would still be over 4% at the core number. Worse than that, though, the things that we actually rely on, you can debate whether we absolutely have to have a car. You might want a car, you might need it to get certain places, but you can live without it. You can't live without food. And food inflation is still through the roof, north of 9%, some items 15 to 20% higher than the year before, which of course was about the same a year earlier. The $100 of groceries that you were able to buy in June 2021 now cost you about $120. So if you spend $500 a month on groceries, if you're lucky to spend just that, you're going to be spending now $600. Mortgage rates, mortgage costs, rental costs, they've all gone up. Stats Canada says mortgage costs have gone up 30% compared to a year ago. So these are the things we need. We need housing, we need food, and those prices, we're feeling them. Absolutely, we feel it at the pumps every time gas goes up or down, but you have to have food. There's no living without food, and that is still sky high. It's mind-boggling that they're trying to claim credit, and they're trying to say that it's their policies. They've done nothing other than tell the Bank of Canada to keep hiking interest rates. They never reined in spending, and they never did anything that could help curtail inflation inside Canada.
You know, Brian, actually, many people would argue, yes, we do need a car, especially out here in the prairies. In the big cities, yeah, you can take the Red Rocket, you can take the GO train, you can whatever, but out here.
You can survive without one. You can actually survive without one, but food you can't. That's a non-negotiable regardless of where you live. Yeah. That's my point.
Yeah. Brian, we saw the video of around 100 protesters who hounded Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at an event in Belleville, Ontario recently. Now, it appears as though a number of Canadians are simply frustrated with this government. Now, you say such displays as those who were heckling and yelling at Trudeau will actually help Trudeau, not hurt him? How so?
Well, for Pierre Poilievre to win, he needs to win over suburban women predominantly. We're talking about women that live in the suburbs of Toronto, of Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, winning back ridings like where George Halal is in Calgary. He needs to win those voters over, swing voters. The display that was, when I first saw the video and I didn't pay attention to what was being said, I thought, well, people are angry. But then I listened to what was being said and the Prime Minister being called a criminal. Well, what law has he broken? You could argue, okay, well, SNC Lavalin, but the RCMP investigated and they didn't lay charges. They were calling him a traitor. They were yelling at the RCMP to arrest Trudeau for treason. In no world has the man committed treason. You may not like his policies. You may think they're awfully wrong for the country, but there's a legal definition of treason, and he hasn't done anything close to that. And then they were calling him a pedophile. There is no evidence anywhere to suggest that this man is a pedophile. And so you've got video of people yelling and screaming, looking deranged, spittle coming out, their face contorted, yelling at the Prime Minister, you're a pedophile. If they associate that with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, and by the way, several of these people have said, I'm not a Conservative, I'm not a Poilievre supporter, I'm angry at Trudeau. But if that becomes the narrative and that becomes viewed as, well, your options are Trudeau, who's smiling as he goes through this crowd and taking selfies with supporters, your view is him or these angry people. Well, those swing voters aren't going to go for those angry people. They may be, by the way, a minority of Canadians who are angry at Trudeau, but this does the opposite of what they claim they're trying to do, and that's remove Trudeau from office. So it was a bad look all around. I know I've taken a lot of flack from that. I may take flack from your audience over that as well, but how? That is not how you convince people to come to your side, making baseless claims against the Prime Minister while screaming in his face.
Brian, I want you to think outside of the box for just a moment. Do you think this potentially could have been a setup by the Trudeau government, hiring actors to come out, to pretend, to scream and yell and say all of these things, making him look better, perhaps, potentially? Could this have been a setup, plants?
No, I don't think it was a setup or a plant. Do I think that they lean into these events? Absolutely they do. And if you watch the video, Trudeau doesn't run away. He leans into it. He goes into the crowd. He continues to smile and take selfies. He knows that these angry people are out there, and he's going to bait them and taunt them. And is Trudeau divisive? Absolutely. Has he angered people? Has he hurt people of his policies? Absolutely. But when he sees crowds like this, he doesn't have to plant them. He sees them and he leans into them to make them angrier, and he uses the division to try and score political points. He wants Canadians who are fed up with his government to just be scared enough of the Conservatives that they won't go near Pierre Poilievre. And you see it in columns like in the Toronto Star claiming that Pierre Poilievre's mean. That was obviously written by someone who's never met Pierre Poilievre, because he's not mean, he's not nasty, he's a very nice guy. He's an easy to get along with guy. But the Liberals want you to be scared of them, and seems like what we saw in Belleville helped with that. Maybe you think what happened in Belleville is great, but you have to put yourself in the mind of a swing voter, someone who voted last time for Trudeau and is fed up with him. If you're someone that will go back and forth like that, are you going to, if you think that that's the other team, are you going to go to them or say, maybe I'll stay home. Maybe I won't vote, or maybe I'll vote for Trudeau again.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
You know, many of us can easily get lost in the ebb and flow of political speeches and distractions. And it seems as though political issues are more important now than ever. Joining me to talk about the political past in Alberta is former Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes. Drew, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Naveen, nice to be talking to you. Nice to be on Bridge City again.
Great to have you back. Now, you have a lot of political experience as well as a life in business. As you see the province moving along after the May election, what are your thoughts on the next steps for Alberta?
Well, the next steps for Albertans, I believe, needs to be more direct democracy. The Swiss people go to the polls 4 times a year to vote on referendums, to vote on ideas, to vote on laws, whether it's putting them in or taking them out. In my 11 years as MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, and I was so grateful to be one of the 87 paid to speak on behalf of Albertans, I consistently heard how Albertans weren't happy with how fast the government was doing things, or what they weren't doing, or what they should be doing. We need more Albertans to step up and get involved. So much of the system is big and immovable, and it's hard. You know, effectiveness is not going to be easy, but that's what Albertans are telling me they'd still like to see. You know, Naveen, our taxes are sky high through the roof on everything. Income, property, carbon, GST. Secondly, the fair deal. People I talk to very, very much want to be a strong part of Canada, but they know that unless we get a fair deal from Ottawa, all of Canada won't be as strong as it can be, particularly Alberta. And then again, some direct democracy, more opportunities for local decision making, and for you to have control over your family, your children's education, those kind of things.
Now, one of the issues you've been passionate about is property rights for landowners. Can you talk about how property rights have changed or even possibly eroded over recent years here in our province?
Well, it's so disappointing. In 2012, one of the main reasons I got involved with the Wild Rose to be involved in provincial politics is because the Progressive Conservative Party at that time had a huge attack, a draconian attack on personal property rights. They actually put in Bill 36, 19, 24, and 50, where they could strip a title without access to courts and without access to compensation. And those bills have been barely modified in 11 years, in spite of the fact we're now in our second successive Conservative government. My last private member's bill was to change that and restore property rights for individuals and families, but it died on the order paper under the last Kenny and Smith government. So shows me the government really doesn't have any desire to make it happen. And why it's essential, Naveen, is how you create wealth and build prosperity is through following the rule of law and property rights. And certainly in Alberta society and Canadian society today, both are under attack.
And that definitely explains why property rights are so important. But what would you recommend to citizens that, you know, what can they do to maintain and maybe recover lost property rights?
Well, main thing is through the Premier, through their MLA, and insist on it. Tell Premier Smith and your local MLA that you're expecting property rights to be enhanced. Well, first of all, restored, but also enhanced, where more and more Albertans have the opportunity to create wealth through owning property and take care of their neighborhoods and their families. And that you're going to hold the Premier accountable. If property rights aren't enhanced in the next 2 or 3 years, it's time to look for a different political alternative.
And then what can MLAs do to advocate for individuals' property rights then?
They have no one better than an MLA or a cabinet minister that has the ear of the Premier, whether it's in the legislature or a caucus or a cabinet meeting. They can absolutely insist on it, and they can pick up my private member's bill, which again just died on the order paper when the election happened in May, that was going to fully give Albertans access to courts and access to full and fair compensation if the Alberta government or a municipality went after somebody's covenant legal right attached to a title, and insist on following the rule of law, building and strengthening property rights so we all can be freer and more prosperous.
Now, I want to keep talking about MLAs for a bit because you were an MLA and you were always very engaged with us here at Bridge City News. So what guidance might you provide to both constituents and new MLAs?
Yeah, thank you for that. And number one is for the MLAs and the constituents, make sure the communication lines are wide open. Make sure you're having full discussions. And two things, you're telling the truth, you're saying what you really want, and you're being effective. One of the biggest reasons I decided to step back from politics, for a while, is the fact that the effectiveness was next to it. It was very, very hard to be effective. It was so easy for cabinet ministers and premiers to set up a release valve or delay or not really pay attention to what people wanted. So put in some deadlines and some determining factors to hold people accountable, like the property rights. Today, tell Premier Smith that by such and such a date, probably 2 years from now, you want to see full property rights fully restored. And if they're not, start organizing for a political alternative. And then for the MLAs, number one is listen to your constituents. There are so many good people out there with so many good ideas. And I was always amazed at how many good ideas people would bring to me that I had never heard of or thought of. There's a wealth of knowledge and people that care out there. So my instructions to MLAs is constituents first, process and party second.
Because it sounds like effectiveness was a challenge for MLAs. And then you're also talking about the importance of listening to constituents. And it seems as though MLAs need to find this balance between listening to their constituents and towing the party line in order to keep their seat in Edmonton. So from your time in politics, you're saying that MLAs definitely need to prioritize what they learn from the constituents rather than being solidly connected to the ideology and the party line to solidify and unify the party, correct?
Correct, absolutely. Constituents first. The parties were elected on a certain set of principles, so everybody has a general understanding of what the parties believe in. But the constituents are who you're there for, and they're the ones that will make Alberta the freest and most prosperous place. But it's also, Naveen, why I'm working with a group of people right now to strengthen direct democracy for Albertans. Jason Kenney put in some laws where citizens' initiative referendums can happen, but he made the number of signatures needed on the petition to put in the referendum so onerous. He made the time frame so short, it'll never happen. It was just virtue signaling or some kind of release valve. We need the Alberta government to make it so. I would suggest if 25,000 of us sign a petition, we can put in a law or take out a law. In Switzerland, 8.4 million Swiss, if 50,000 of them sign a petition, they can actually do this. They also have referendums just in a general directional setting way for which they'd like to see the government do. If it's a constitutional change, then the barrier for the number of signatures is higher, and that probably makes sense. But the barriers that the UCP and Premier Kenney set up are far too onerous. It'll never happen. So I guess the whole idea of that is give your MLA a chance to represent you and deliver a free and prosperous Alberta, but you got to hold them accountable. And if they won't do it, direct democracy for Albertans so we can do it.
Because it almost seems like parties are united on for different reasons. Like it seems like more like of the left-leaning parties are united because they think alike, whereas more of the right-leaning parties, they unite because they think independently. Is that a challenge for right-leaning parties?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is, and potentially we're more independent and more issue-based. But we also forget, though, that the large number of Albertans are family and fiscal and constitutional conservatives, and that's where we should focus. I mean, one of my big regrets is not completing the mission. And yeah, I had a lot of good victories. I helped lots of Albertans and constituents on the way. But when I was first elected in 2012, Danielle Smith and I stood beside each other, and Alison Redford was spending $42 billion a year. We thought that was way too much government, taxes way too high. Now Premier Smith in her first budget is spending $68 billion. I can't add those two things together. Healthcare was a prime example. Healthcare, the combination of Alberta Health Services and Alberta Health, who pays the doctors, next year is going to be over $26 billion. Seemed like whenever I was in committee in Edmonton, whenever we were questioning Alberta Health Services, the Alberta Health Minister would never be there, and vice versa. When we're questioning the Health Minister, Alberta Health Services wouldn't be there. It was a perfect wall of not being able to hold people accountable and get to the truth and the ideas and those kind of things. These are the things that Albertans have to insist on change, and MLAs and Premier has to deliver it. And if they do not, then we have to work for change and direct positive change with more direct democracy for Albertans, I think, is the way to go.
So what do parties need to do to provide more allowance for MLAs to advocate for their constituents?
Yeah, thank you. Free votes in the legislature, absolutely. They used to say that they like free votes, but if you were ever going to vote against them, you had to tell them why. It's very, very strong. So they need to make it truly free votes. If an MLA wants to stand up and do something on behalf of their constituents or vote a certain way, they need to let them. Secondly, we need way more private members' business in the Alberta legislature. We only do that, I think it's 3 hours on a Monday. A lot of those Mondays get canceled because of long weekends or the government plays with the schedule. In my 11 years, I only had 2 private members' bills. One was defeated on second reading. I tried to make FOIP more affordable for not-for-profits. The PCs way back in 2013 killed that on second reading. And my second one died on the order paper. So in 11 years, I should have at least had 11 chances to do something for my constituents. And I sort of got one. Anyway, so yeah, that's the second thing, more private members' business. And potentially we need some situations where in caucus, everybody can speak freely. Also, it's very, very tightly controlled what your question is about, what you talk about, what your speech is. We need to give MLAs more opportunity to ask and talk about what their constituents want them to talk about, not what the party wants them to talk about.
And you've been working on your political action committee. What are your plans for using this to engage people and advocate for the best for Albertans?
Thank you. Yeah, we've talked to a lot of Albertans that are really interested in doing this, and through things like political action committees, foundations. I look at how America's got some very, very active organizations like Prager University, or it's called PragerU now, or the Hoover Institute. Those are the things that we're looking at, we're pursuing, we're talking to people about, and it's been pretty exciting so far. At the end of the day, we need Albertans to understand what's achievable, and it's our province, it's our system. So much is achievable. And then secondly, at some point, we're going to need the political power. We're going to need the seats, people in the legislature that will make this happen. That's on the back of our minds too.
So now you're neither part of the UCP or the NDP, but based on what you've been seeing and hearing, what is your advice to the NDP and the UCP?
Well, let's start with Premier Smith and the UCP. Number one, we need a government that spends less so they can tax less. This carbon tax, I mean, the fact that we pay so much carbon tax through our tier one carbon tax, like our fertilizer makers, our potato plants, they pay tons of carbon tax, and then the provincial government just recirculates it into renewables. My goodness, look at how expensive our utility bills have become. Let's truly and legitimately end the carbon tax, and let's make sure that the cost of utilities becomes affordable. Secondly, competition in business. The relationship is too cozy between big business and government. I tried to change some of the lobbying rules about a year ago, so making it so lobbying had to be more transparent, a little more rules around who could lobby and who couldn't. Absolutely. We need to make it so there's less people up there asking for your hard-earned tax dollar. Thirdly, the fair deal. I get a little tired when I see all the premiers get together and yell at the prime minister for more money, and as soon as he gives them a bit more, they all be quiet. It is time to legitimately tell Ottawa we demand a fair deal. And Naveen, the best way I think to do that is we tell Ottawa 3 years from now, we're going to have an independence referendum. Ottawa, you've got 3 years to give us a fair deal, and we'll let Albertans decide if the deal is fair or not. And also speak the truth and speak it in a truthful way. As an example, this net zero discussion that the Premier and the Prime Minister are having right now is so wrong. The UCP government's making it look like they're talking like they're against the net zero, but in reality, when you dig into it, Trudeau and the federal Liberals are saying net zero by 2035. The UCP is saying net zero by 2050. Either one will cost the people of Alberta 200,000 jobs, billions of dollars of value and prosperity and net worth. Let's call net zero what it is. It is a way to make us all poorer without truly helping raise the standard of living for all people in the world. And let's start to call the truth, and let's work on that. And again, it's back to effectiveness. I'm so honored and so grateful to have represented Cypress Medicine Hat and Albertans for 11 years. But at the end of the day, the mission's not complete, and I'm looking for effectiveness.
Well, you certainly sound busy, even though you don't have a seat in Edmonton. So, Drew, do you have a website or a way for people watching to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to connect with me would give me a text, give me a phone call at 403-581-1443. I'd love to hear. Twitter, Facebook, and you're going to start to see some political action stuff come out when we're fully registered, and some foundation stuff. And we're going to keep moving forward. But I'm easy to find, so thank you.
Well, we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. But Drew, that's all the time we have for today. But thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for Bridge City News.
That was Drew Barnes. He joined us from his office in Medicine Hat. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.